Hello and welcome to our second webinar of the SAP Around the Globe webinar series. The webinar series aims at introducing different perspectives and streams of SAP research around the world. 2 weeks ago, we had the pleasure to hear about ontologies by Charmaine Williamson and Anna-Marie Davis from South Africa. And the video is online and you can find it on our YouTube channel. But today we take a perspective from another part of the world, namely Colombia. And so I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker to you, or speakers. So we have Manuel Henao-Restrepo and Luz Maria Rivas. I'll tell you a few things about them so that you get to know them a little bit better. Manuel is an associate professor in the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities at the University of Antioquia. And he teaches courses on social management and social project management. I think there you can maybe also see the link already to the things that he's going to talk about today. He holds a PhD in management from the University of EAFIT, and his research interests are strategies, practice and processes, nonprofit organizations, and resourcing. And he usually uses a participatory research method approach that he is going to tell us a little bit more about. And Manuel is joined by Luz Ma, who's a research professor of strategy at the School of Management at the University EAFIT. So I guess that they know each other from. And she teaches strategy courses, and her research interests include everything around strategy as practice, process, strategic risk, complexity, and trust. And she's currently conducting research on Colombian business families. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining us and for sharing your insights on methods from a Colombian perspective. Before I hand over to Luz Ma, who is going to tell you a little bit what is going on in general in Colombia, I would like to advertise our next webinar, which is on contexts from an Indian perspective, which takes place on November 10th. Having said that, I give the word to, I guess, Luz Ma, who's starting this, and stop my presentation. And yeah, I'm very happy that you're here.
Hi, Milena. Hi, everyone. It's a privilege for us to be here with you all, and thank you for joining us today. Manuel and I feel that this is a privilege that we can share with you all the learnings that we had during the doctoral process that Manuel had under my advising, but we were more than a student and advisor. We were like co-researchers of this because I didn't have previous experience in nonprofits or social methods like this participatory research that we are going to share with you today. So I learned along with Manuel doing this research. And before we talk about this method specifically, we are going to talk about what has been happening about the strategy as practice in Colombia. And I'm going to share with you, Manuel, if you please go on. We found the strategy as practice in 2018. We didn't know about it before that. We were researching about the strategy, and we were following Mintzberg and qualitative researchers, but we didn't differentiate strategy as practice from the traditional way of researching about strategy, but we didn't like the qualitative perspective of research in strategy. So when we found about this perspective was so like an eureka moment for us. And we started looking at it, like doing literature review about it. And then my student, Marta Reyes, that is now my boss, and she's been a doctor for a long time. She found David Seidel's papers and she said, I want to do my internship with him, something that had never happened before in our doctoral program. No one had ever had a relationship with University of Zurich. And we tried to do it, and she went for 2 months to stay with David and all his research team. And this was like a very important moment for us because we got to know all the strategy as practice scholars, these not only the articles but the videos, and we dive very deep into this perspective, and we really fell in love with the strategy as practice. Manuel, please go on. Marta's doctoral thesis was about trust, and specifically we contributed with the notion of trusting in the emergence of a strategizing practice, and David Seidel, that was his internship advisor, was also one of his evaluators. So he allowed us to be closer to this perspective and to learn how to do research from strategy as practice. Then, Manuel, please. We did a literature review in Latin America. We published this paper, Strategizing, Opening New Avenues in Latin America. And then we found Rosalia, who is here with us. We found that just in Brazil, not in other countries in Latin America, they had been studying also about strategy as practice, and they had research about strategy as practice. But we also found that there were very little articles about strategy as practice in other countries. We also wrote a book chapter in Spanish about trusting in a book that was published from our university from different perspectives about trust. Please go on, Manuel. Also, we have another student of our doctoral program that is now a doctor and is the director of our program, that is Heiko Schmidt, who researched about the strategy making in new ventures, and he follows the entrepreneurship as practice. Go on, please, Manuel. We had some publications, for example, this case example in experience strategy from Marta and Heiko Schmidt with Sandra Milena Santamaria, who is another researcher from our university, and some others. Emmanuel, if you go rapidly through this, some other publications that we have from this, and this year that is coming out, this Elgar Encyclopedia of Strategy as Practice, Marta Reyes is co-authoring with Rosalia and Eduardo Vilar. This is very important for us because we have been like making alliances with these Brazilian researchers. We are so happy. I'm going to tell you a little bit more after this. And also Maria de Villa, who is a strategy researcher in our school. Also, he's publishing about corporate political strategizing. And with Jorge Vélez and Diana Londoño and other researchers from our school, we are publishing about boundary games analysis. That is a method useful also for strategy as practice. Please go on, Manuel. We have other doctoral theses that have been finished recently. Lenis Araque, Manuel, and Alejandro Rosso. Please go on, Manuel. And now we are doing this postdoctoral research about Colombia's business families. Specifically, we are researching about familyness as practice and how it is built across generations. Okay, Manuel, go on.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure for me also to be in this space and share with you this experience. It's an important experience for us because it's research that thinking about our context, thinking about our problems from a strategy as practice field. I hope that you enjoy these elements and share with us insights, questions, and different learnings that permit this conversation. For us, it's a pleasure to are part of this community and this conversation. I'm going to speak about different learnings, about different elements that we identify in our research. Mm, Conducted a participatory research from SAP in America Latina, in Latin America, and about a special organization for us that is our community wide organization. The communities that work together to solve different water problems and social problems also. Um, okay. Okay. In this presentation, we like to share with you two elements, in general, two elements. The first one is about our experience, uses and a specific method, systematization of experience. That is a method that born in Latin America in 17th and 18th and permit us to develop a research on practice perspective in this context. And the second is our methodological insights about rigor and deep in this method, but in special about the participatory research in general. And this slides is based on or are based on our research. Our research um, was about how strategy emerging resourcing practice within community water organization. We use resourcing perspective to understand the relationship between resources and strategy from SAT perspective and identify three particular elements. The first one is about the resourcing theory, a theory that permits to identify this relationship in different kinds or types of organization, for example, non-profit, but also governmental organization, profit organization, new ventures, etc. The second element is about the practices around resources in community-wide organization, what practices occur or happen in this context, and three, about practices and patterns of the strategy in these practices. The three elements that permit us to identify different contribution about the strategy, resourcing, and non-profits in this research. But I'm going to focus in the different elements or methodological elements that permit to learn or identify insights about the participatory research. We are located in South America. You can see in this slide our location. Colombia is located in the north of South America. It's an Andean and Caribbean country. We are crossed with three big mountains, Andean mountains, and we is in the middle of two oceans, Atlantic and Pacific. That is important to identify some characteristics or features about our reality. And this research was conducted in Andean area, especially with communities in rural areas. In Colombia, for example, rural areas is characterized by levels of education, or for example, the people don't or can to go to the university easily. It's very special context. And for example, governmental organization and profit organization can to provide drinking water because it's very expensive for them. Then organization in this context is very community organization in this context are so important to solving different problems. In this case about water. In this picture, you can say, for example, award of management or award of stewardship of one community water organization, the biggest in this research. They are people that work together. This is an DAC, for example, and they are checking the condition of in the water intact, for example, in this moment, and is people working together to solving different problems, in this case, water. It's important to remark that these organizations are citizen initiatives. Are no profit organization or enterprises, no. It's citizen initiative, people that work together, grouped in different initiatives. In general, non-profits, based on community needs, relationship, historical memory, etc., and capabilities to solve this problem. Solve territorial problems relating different things, for example, environmental issues, education, etc. But in this case, we focus in water problems. And it's important to remark also that in Colombia, for example, we have 50,000 of this kind of organization. This present of organization is very important to remark or identify the importance of this organization to solve, for example, drinking water problems. Then it's important to continue research about this kind of organization, but also is the research in this organization face challenges, for example, about how data is collected, how promote participatory research with people that, for example, have low levels of education or don't have a lot of abilities or capabilities to write, for example, or to connect ideas in abstract way, etc. These reflections is important to solve these challenges in the future also. And we selected or choose different organizations depending of the size or different characteristics. We work with 4 organizations: Jaguar, River, Coffee, and Mountain, to identify nuances and different characteristics of this kind of organization. Okay, now we like to focus in the systematization of experience method that offer an overview about this method to permit understand some elements about this method. And after that, we're going to remark about analysis in this method to identify after different learnings and contribution in this perspective, yes? And first, it's important to say that systematization of experience is a qualitative research method. This element put a special emphasis in, for example, the opinion, sense of people about the reality, about the organizational reality. And when the systematization of experience was born in 80s and 70s, this method solve a problem of different organization of educational context. This problem is related or was related to show, to identify, to recognize identity of this process. What happened in this process? What is the specific characteristic of this process? Then this method produce knowledge to improve this organization, this process, and promote transformative change in them. Yes, is the 2 objectives of this method. And this method has received many contributions for several disciplines, in special and recently, for example, in social science, sociology, social work, etc., have contributed to this method in diverse elements. About many assumptions of systematization of experience, it's important to say that it is or it has a social critical interest in social research because aim to identify conditions in this organization, in these practices, also identify transformative perspective, transformative possibilities in the research. Second, it assumes a dialectical view of practices. There are no dichotomic, for example, assumption between knowledge and action, or between sense and action, etc. No, practice have a dialectical view. Also, it builds new knowledge about practices from people's sense. I consider that its element connects closely systematization of experience, for example, with phenomenology methods, because it's so specific to identify sense that people build or made about practices, and recognize the active role of people in the knowledge construction. Then practice is what people do, but also is an experience, is a process of generated knowledge, is a gather or actions that happens in a specific context or in historical process, is intentional, and is processed by sense, the people sense. Okay, in our work, we compare the systematization of experience with ethnography, because for us was important to recognize the similarities and differences with other methods, because systematization of experience is a lot is known in Latin America, and especially in social science and education, but not in other fields. For example, in organization studies in Latin America, no yet, and around the world is also similarly. Then we compare different elements. In special, we talk the proposal of Morse, Janice Morse, that consider that in the analysis in qualitative methods, is necessary to be explicit the cognitive process that occur behind the analysis. In this case, the author, she identified four cognitive process that you can see in this slide: comprehending, synthesizing, theorizing, and recontextualizing. We identify the similarities and differences between, for example, ethnography, to focus the question or the interest in analysis in participatory research. And we identify these stages or these cognitive process in different stages of the process in the research of systematization of experience. In this slide, you can identify four main stages that literature of systematization of experience propose. Different authors propose different stages. Some authors identify 5, 6, 3, but we propose 4 because consider that gather the main ideas in the literature. For example, the stage of definition of agreements is important to define with practitioners, with other people that participate in the research. For example, what is the systematize, what practices is important to systematize, what is the focus that we like to identify in this practice, who systematizes, for example, etc. This question are resolved with people, not only with academic research. Is important to define a common agreement. Other element that is very important in this method is about narrative reconstruction of the practices. In some authors are good that it's important to write write stories about the practice that permit to reflect or take the experience that the people have around practices. Other element or other stage is about critical analysis of practices. In this element, the literature considers that it's important to promote dialogues and conversations between theory, others' experience, and the practices to identify elements that permit learning, new findings and contribution in this perspective. And finally, it's important to learn to transform how the people learn to transform these own practices. This is very important in this perspective. All stage is crossed by participatory issues for participatory approach. When you review the literature about systematization of experience, you can identify in this chart different authors, in general Latin American authors, Jara in Central America, Torres in Colombia, Mejias in Colombia, Piso in Argentina, etc., that identify different perspectives, different emphasis, and what analysis is in systematization of experience, and permit to identify techniques and procedures that permit analysis in this method. However, we like to identify or emphasize in 4 elements about analysis in systematization of experience. The first one is analysis is related to dialogue between people experience with theory and others experience in a participatory way. Second, analysis is a narrative reconstruction of practices. Is a exercise to promote that people narrate stories, narrate experience about practices, and build a main story. Analysis is about process of learning of experience. It's important in systematization that the people learn, the people recognize different elements and insights in their own practices, and identify new knowledge in this context. And analysis is about identification of transformative elements in the practice. These four elements is a key elements to identify or comprehend analysis in systematization of experience method. In our research, we identify then the how happen the cognitive process, and compare that with literature in systematization of experience. For example, in comprehending, synthesizing, theorizing, reconceptualizing, we identify the difference and the similarities, because we faced different challenges to promote or to conduct systematization of experience methods in the context of community-wide organization. For example, the people don't like write, the people don't have a lot of the skills or capabilities to write. Many people can't write, but don't like or don't have enough time to write. Then we need to change a little or to make little change in the methodology to achieve our objectives or achieve the participatory research, for example, in analysis stages. Also, we identify a new cognitive process in our research. Janice Morse identified 4 cognitive processes, but we say that in a participatory research, it's so important to develop a capability to envision of the change in the future. What happened in the future? What people like to happen in the future to promote the change, to promote the new ways and new realities. Then we recognize the importance to promote and develop a new cognitive process that we name envisioning change. In this moment, we're going to present how we conduct this cognitive process in our research to specify elements, techniques, and procedures that we use. The first of this cognitive process is about comprehending. Comprehending is a process that related to recognize the main elements of the context of the practices, main elements to practice actors, times, scenarios, etc. In this case, we promote different meetings to define scopes and involve participants. For example, in this case, you can say the different leaders of community-wide organization discuss about the scope. I like to identify this element or these other elements. For example, in the first at the first of the research, the people like it to a historical reconstruction of all experience or science 16 of this organization, but no, it's impossible. It's so difficult. But with the people, we was going to define the scope and identify agreements necessary to conduct the research. In other moment about synthesizing the information in the traditional research, in this cognitive process of happen, for example, coding or for example transcript interviews, etc. In this case, we identify other possibilities. In this picture, you can say the board of river association. There are people that work with water in this area, but they don't like write, but in some cases don't have the ability to write. Then we reveal different stories orally. The people talk about for example, taking care of water in tag, or about the networking with other organizations, and we put in card this information, and we record these informations, and we transcribe different elements. At the end, we don't have a transcription of interviews or observation field diary. No, we have different stories of people relate their experience and their practices. At the end of the process of this synthesizing process, we had 58 stories, short stories. For us was important to have short stories, because other challenge that we faced with large stories, that the people can read a lot of papers, a lot of texts. The people prefer to read short papers that identify and permit to narrate their experience. Then after the interviews, workshops, observation work, etc., we made 58 short stories. After that interiorizing process, we again develop meetings with people, but in this case, we talk the resourcing perspective, because in this element for systematization, it's important to put in dialogue and conversation with theory and other experience. Then we identify the element of resourcing theory to connect with the conversation and practices. We use, for example, other tools from, for example, a strategy as practice field, for example, visual mapping process in analysis from Langley and Ravasi, or for example, a coding or labeling proposal from Feldman and Luke, etc. We use Atlas T, of course, to facilitate the process data, but in general, with people, we talk or read again and again and again the short stories to identify elements to put in conversation with theory. In this slide, you can say, for example, the process of labeling in participatory meetings. For example, in the left, you can say two examples. It's in Spanish, but you can say the main structure of the exercise. For example, the people read the short stories, 1 or 2 pages, and the people put the levels with colors. Colors in these cases is connected with elements of resourcing cycles in the resourcing literature. For example, in the right of the slide, you can identify, for example, green is schemas, blue is about sustained outcomes, yellow is about resources. This representation, these maps were done after the labeling exercise. The people identify this element in the short stories, and after that, with people representate in cycles this information. This representation was so important to analysis in a participatory way because the people in this context prefer to interact with graph, interact with maps, interact with image than with text. Then this was a very important tool to promote analysis in a participatory way. After that, in a reconceptualizing process, we identify or we conduct, for example, other meetings, etc. But in this case, we compare the experience and practices of different organizations. For example, in this picture, you can say the 4 organizations and the people put the maps of cycles in different locations in these papers to recognize, for example, patterns, relationship, etc. And this mapping permit to interact with people easily. And about envisionment change, we identify in different moments of the process learnings of potential, but at the end was necessary to a meeting to recognize special elements to improve in the future, and these pictures show the result of the workshop that permit that. Okay. Now we like to connect this experience with rigor and deep in analysis, yes, to recognize different possible contribution and learnings in this process. We recognize different criteria to identify or to achieve rigor in analysis in qualitative research. But for us, in our research, it's important to remark different elements. For example, about trustworthiness, it's important to recognize that in our research, was important to use variety of data, sources, and formats in generate organization. Recognize the important and ongoing validation with actors from practice and similar practices. For us, was important to permanently conduct a meeting with people, check the information together, etc. It's important to develop this exercise in a participatory research to guarantee rigor. And of course, building data with participants and share data and findings with these participants. And about comprehensiveness of in analysis, in our case, we use a multi-method, different types of data and different approaches to analysis. We don't explicit the cognitive process to identify what is the best dispositive and tool to connect this process with the reality on capabilities of people, and we make cognitive process explicit in all moments of the research. About main learnings for us in this research is the first one is the power of reality in the research. Yes, not only with source of data, also with a form to interpret and analysis experience of people. The narratives permit the people to organize, making sense about practices, etc. But it's a work of the academic research to translate these narratives in other formats and in other possibilities. But the reality is a very good tool to conduct participatory research. And the second, we recognize the importance of polyphony of voices that transcends or that permit to recognize the multiplicity, diversity of the narratives or experience about the organization practices. In the tradition of systematization of experience, for example, the literature proposed build one story, propose that people identify elements of the practices and identify or write one text. In our experience, we recognize the importance to put together different texts, different narratives, because these narratives show nuances of the same experience and same practices. For us, it's very important to remark this element also. And we recognize that this method and this experience permit to say something to SAP and open strategy, because it's a very, very useful method to identify practices such as experience, for example, in our countries, in special because enable the inclusion of academic and non-professional practitioners in research. For example, we identify in some firms and other enterprises that the people have high levels of education, but don't like to write. It's not so common practices. Then it's important, for example, to promote conversation and engage of these people in the learning, in the research. And second, we consider that systematization of experience is a participatory method that permits to empower practitioners in their experience. In this way, permit to transform and improve their practices and organization. Okay, thank you so much. We like to share with us about this conversation, question, on others' ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you. So exciting to see the method and applied. And also thanks for sharing, of course, the photos so that we can get a feeling of how it could look like.